Welcome to Momming as a Millennial, the podcast where we explore the intersection of tradition and modern parenting. Have you ever felt overwhelmed trying to balance being a mom with your professional aspirations, all while dealing with side-eye from your parents who think you're doing it wrong? Me too. I'm your host, Christine Gerizzo, a journalist, blogger, and proud mama of 2 young children. I'm so glad you're here with me. Together, we can navigate the complexities of millennial motherhood and find what resonates with our true, authentic selves. Let's dive in. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I wanted to talk about gender stereotypes in Playtime. I'm going to start with a story. Growing up, I had 2 older brothers. Not only was I the youngest in the family, but I was also the only girl. Naturally, my brothers influenced my play. I wanted to be just like them and play with what they were playing with. I have very fond memories of playing with micro machines and matchbox cars with my brothers. When it came to playing outside or with other kids, my brothers didn't really want me around. While my mom didn't necessarily keep tabs on us while we were outside, she did make it clear that we weren't meant to wander more than a block in either direction of our house. In that limited radius, I was the only girl in a sea of boys. I tried to keep up with my brothers and often tried to get in their sports or games. They would tell me I couldn't because I was a girl or that I should go away, but I would insist. The other boys never seemed to mind that much, so I usually got to stay, much to my brother's dismay. I remember one time we were playing dodgeball in our backyard with a bunch of the neighborhood boys. I insisted on playing even though the ball was whipping back and forth pretty fast and I was actually intimidated for once. At one point I got hit in the face, probably by one of my brothers, although I don't exactly remember. And I started to cry. That was a great excuse for them to say, "I told you so," and banish me into the house to put ice on my face and nurse my bruised ego. Never once did I think I shouldn't be playing with them because I was a girl, that I should play house or dolls while they played cars or sports. I think because I had no other girls to play with, I just assumed I could do whatever the boys were doing. And because my brothers used my gender as a reason to exclude me, I was even more determined to be included and keep up with the boys. This mindset has treated me well over the years. I played co-ed soccer for several years and was never intimidated by the boys. At school and gym class, there were always different standards to meet for the boys versus the girls. The boys were expected to do more sit-ups, more push-ups, run faster, swim more laps. I just didn't accept that. I did as many sit-ups and push-ups, and I swam more laps than the boys. I was just as athletic, and I wasn't going to be told otherwise. When I was becoming a mom, I thought about how I would implement this mindset into my parenting. I was not going to let anyone tell my daughter she couldn't do anything she wanted. She would not have limitations. She was going to do any sport her little heart desired. And if she wanted to play with the boys, all the better. Then my first child was a boy. I figured this would be easy when it came to gender roles because it's always easier being a boy, no matter what the scenario. Piece of cake. One day, when he was 4 years old, I picked him up from daycare summer camp, and I noticed him and another boy were playing dress-up. They both had dresses on and were carrying purses. I didn't think anything of it. Days and weeks later, I started to see more and more pictures on the daycare app of him dressed up in various dresses, princess or otherwise. Then a few weeks later, I picked him up, and he was in a dress again with a purse slung across his chest. I called him to let him know that I was there. And while he was undressing and putting back the costume stuff, the teacher said to me, "Boy, does he like playing dress-up." "Oh yeah?" I asked. "Yep, he's over there practically every day. That dress he had on today is his favorite." Later that day, I told my husband what the teacher said, and we both laughed about it. A few days later, I mentioned it to my mom, because I tell her everything, and she said, "I hope that doesn't mean it's going to be a cross-dresser when he's older." I was taken aback and disappointed by her reaction. Never once did it cross my mind as weird or concerning, or that it may inform any type of behavior as an adult. I didn't have any issues or concerns with him being drawn to playing dress-up, and in hindsight, I'm so thankful my husband feels the same as me, never batting an eye at the situation. We thought it was cute, imaginative, and endearing. My mother's reaction and my reflection on this situation, of course, got me thinking about gendered play, gendered toys, and what my parenting philosophy was around it. You know, it's not uncommon for society to dictate certain toys for boys and others for girls. From action figures to dolls, the lines have been drawn for decades. But I've given this a lot of thought, and the conclusion I've come to is there actually is no such thing as a gendered toy, meaning a toy made specifically for a boy or for a girl. It is the advertising, the packaging, or the reinforced stereotypes from older generations or other cultures that ultimately associate most toys with boys or girls. It's the marketing around the toys. These gender associations are stereotyped. Girl toys tend to be pink, purple, passive, focusing on domesticity, nurturing, and appearance or beauty. Boys' toys, on the other hand, tend to be blue, black, or dark green, and they emphasize building, action, and aggressive play. Unfortunately, in our society, very few toys are free of gendered stereotypes. I've seen it with the kinds of gifts my kids get. My son gets cars, sports equipment, Legos, superheroes, STEM activities, and my daughter gets dolls, princesses, purses, jewelry, and makeup playsets. So why does society gender stereotype toys? How did we get here? Apparently, this wasn't always the case. In the early 1900s, toys were rarely marketed to different genders, and pink was actually considered a masculine color. The color red is often associated with courage, vigor, strength, rage, drive, and various other traits that are attributed to males. And in the 1920s, pink was considered an equivalent of red, but lighter, so for boys rather than men. But by the 1940s, manufacturers quickly caught on to the idea that wealthier families would buy an entire new set of clothing, an entire new set of toys and other gadgets if the products were marketed differently for both genders, rather than just reusing what they had from one child to the next. People were increasingly buying pink for girls, and so the idea that pink is for girls and blue is for boys exploded in the 1980s and 90s. As I was researching this, I started to get a little disappointed. Could it really be that marketing departments and profit margins are responsible for the very gender-specific toys we see today? Well, capitalism strikes again. What an unfortunate reality. I want to move on and talk a little bit about what people are saying about gendered toys and why they might be in favor of or against reinforcing these gender stereotypes. A 2017 study from Pew Research Center showed that 76% of people surveyed said it was a good thing for parents to encourage young girls to play with toys or do activities associated with the opposite gender. That number increases to 80% for women and 81% for millennials. I found it interesting that when asked the same question about boys playing with toys or doing activities associated with the opposite gender, the number of those surveyed who said it was a good thing dropped to 64%. That number increases to 71% for women and 69% for millennials. Overall, what I'm getting from this study is that millennial women, aka millennial mamas, are most likely to encourage cross-play between genders and toys, which makes complete sense considering how I feel about all this and the fact that I am indeed a woman and a millennial. The study also shows me that there's still concern about boys exhibiting traits associated with girls or femininity, like vulnerability, emotion, compassion, caring, and empathy. And there's less concern about girls exhibiting traits associated with boys, like strength, courage, independence, leadership, and aggressiveness. As a whole, is society really still concerned about raising sissy men? I don't think I've actually heard the word sissy in decades, and it is probably coming from my grandfather, if I'm going to be honest. So, what effect, if any, does play and gendered toys or activities have on development? If a boy plays with girl toys or plays dress-up, will it impact their development? While I've read information on both sides of the argument, for example, playing with toys opposite a child's gender has no significant impact on what their future will entail or what their career choices will be. And on the other side, the toys provided by parents deliver some of the earliest gender-based messages by encouraging children to play in activities associated with those toys. Therefore, early play and the type of toys do very much impact how the child feels about masculinity and femininity. Whew, that word is actually a lot harder to say than you would think. However, the overwhelming consensus seems to be that childhood toys and play do influence thoughts and behaviors around gender. The research that illustrates a correlation between play and these behaviors is not only more abundant, but the breadth and depth of this research is much deeper. So just how much influence do toys have? Let's dig in. I read several studies that concluded a person's decisions and behaviors, for example, clothing choices, career choices, personal and professional interactions, are all shaped by their perceptions of gender. And how is a person's perception of gender formed, you ask? Well, it's a culmination of their surroundings. Gender roles are influenced by the media, their family, their environment, and society. In addition to natural physical growth, children develop within a set of gender-specific social and behavioral norms that are embedded in family structure, natural play patterns, close friends, and the standards set in school life. So what does that mean? The roles we learn to play as kids, especially when it comes to gender, have a big impact on how we see ourselves and connect with others as we grow up. I also learned that children's attitudes towards gender are fully formed by the age of 7. 7! From that early of an age, kids latch onto stereotypes as a way to categorize and make sense of their world. Crazy. That indicates to me just how crucial those initial formative years really are. According to Dr. Sneha John, a clinical child and adolescent psychologist from Dubai, gendering of toys can lead to lack of holistic development by causing a loss of opportunities in childhood, meaning that when we assign specific genders to toys, it may limit children's overall development because it restricts the range of experiences and skills that the child can explore during childhood. When toys are strictly associated with certain gender roles, children may miss out on developing a well-rounded set of skills necessary for personal growth and maturity. So right there, I'm thinking, hey, it's okay that my son wants to dress up in dresses. She continues to say, stereotyped toys would limit the scope of future careers as children may not be allowed to expand their cognitive abilities due to such stereotypes. In other words, gendered play and the accompanying toys can narrow the thought process of children, actually curbing creativity and innovation. Fascinating. Another study I found states that it's important to recognize the role that gender plays in child development and to promote gender equality and inclusivity. This can involve challenging stereotypes, providing equal opportunities and support for children regardless of gender, and creating environments that promote identity development for everyone. And yet another study I found addresses how gender-neutral play fosters creativity, empathy, and open-mindedness, which of course is carried into adulthood. From the parents' perspective, I found a poll commissioned by the Genius of Play that showed a third of adults surveyed said how they played as kids impacted the careers they pursued later in life. And most of the employed adults that were surveyed reported implementing many of the soft skills they learned through play as kids in their daily jobs today, including creativity, teamwork, problem solving, empathy, and communicating with others. These playtime activities aren't simply childhood memories. We're taking them into adulthood as enduring interests and pastimes, whether it's artistic endeavors like drawing, musical pursuits, writing, scientific exploration, or beyond. The survey's findings underscore that play remains a potent force throughout life. And yet, if that wasn't enough of an information overload for you, research conducted by Judith Elaine Blakemore, who was a professor of psychology at Purdue, shows toys that are categorized as moderately masculine encourage children's physical, cognitive, academic, musical, and artistic skills more so than those that are moderately feminine. She says that strongly gender-typed toys might encourage attributes that aren't ones that you actually want to foster. For girls, this would include a focus on attractiveness and appearance, perhaps providing a message that this is the most important thing, to look pretty. For boys, the emphasis on violence and aggression might be less desirable in the long run. I think this plays in the reverse as well. Moderately masculine toys, as Judith characterizes them, have positive qualities that we as parents may want to encourage in boys and girls. For example, building things, spatial skills, scientific exploration, math, technology, etc. And I personally feel that the same rings true for having boys and girls play with moderately feminine toys so that they develop qualities like nurturing, caring for infants, skills in cooking, and household chores. Well, that was a lot of information. This brings me to my final thought for today's episode. What I'm taking from all of this is that the parents and caregivers play a big role in deciding how children perceive gender roles, starting with what kind of toys we provide them or allow them to play with. As a mom, I don't want to limit my child's potential or growth by perpetuating stereotypes through playtime. The majority of the studies I've read provide substantial evidence indicating it's best to expose children to all types of toys, that being gendered or gender neutral. It's okay for my daughter to play with dolls, but it's also okay for my son too. And it's good for both of them to play dress up, whatever that means to them. I don't want to enforce rigid gender norms in play, sending a message about what is appropriate or acceptable for a child based on their gender. And I don't want to unintentionally restrict my children by only offering them toys that align with traditional gender roles, especially because my household does not perpetuate those traditional gender roles. And that's something we'll touch on in a later podcast. So my son asked for a dollhouse for Christmas this past year. It was all he talked about for months. He saw one when we visited one of his friend's house, who happens to be a girl, and decided he had to have one too. So Santa brought him a dollhouse. I didn't hesitate or think twice about that decision. And I'm glad he got what he wanted. He loves playing with it. And I would never stop him from playing dress up or wearing a purse. That's all I have for today. You can check out my extended show notes on my website for all of the resources that I've referenced in this podcast. And if you're looking for ideas on how to implement gender-neutral play, you can read my blog about my 5 favorite tips on how to remove gender stereotypes in your child's playroom. Both of these links can be found in the show description. Thanks so much. Be sure to follow or subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and share with your millennial mom friends. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to Momming as a Millennial. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a friend or on social. You can find more from me at contemplativemama.com. Until next time.